Before we dive in, I need you to do something. Type in the comments, "Some souls never truly say goodbye." Trust me, by the end of the story, you'll understand why I asked you to write that. This isn't just another story you'll scroll past and forget. This is something that might shake what you believe about death, memory, and whether love can survive beyond a single lifetime. Maybe you've lost someone you couldn't bear to lose, someone who left too soon with words unsaid or promises unfinished. Maybe you've wondered if they're really gone, or if somehow they're still with you. But what if I told you that sometimes death isn't the end of a promise? What if it's just a pause between chapters? This story about two little brothers will take you through impossible memories, shocking discoveries, and a revelation that changed an entire family's understanding of what it means to love someone forever. And just when you think you figured out how deep this goes, the last 5 minutes will show you something that proves love doesn't just transcend death, it plans its own return. If this story moves something inside you, hit that like button and subscribe, because this isn't just about watching, it's about believing that the connections that matter most can survive anything, even time itself. The first time Evelyn Whitmore found her 5-year-old son Jasper drawing detailed military aircraft in their sunlit kitchen, she assumed he'd been watching too much Discovery Channel with his father. The sketches were remarkably precise for a child his age, complete with propeller configurations, wing markings, and what appeared to be bullet holes along the fuselage. "That's a beautiful airplane, sweetheart," she said, setting down his glass of orange juice and peering over his shoulder. "Where did you learn to draw planes like that?" Jasper looked up with those serious green eyes that always seemed too old for his face. "From when I was a pilot, Mama, before I came to you." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine, but she forced a smile. Children said strange things all the time. "Before you came to me?" "Mm-hmm." Jasper returned to his drawing, adding what looked like military insignia to the wing. "I flew planes like this in the war. Felix was with me. He was my co-pilot, but also kind of like my little brother I had to take care of." 4-year-old Felix looked up from his coloring book at the mention of his name, his blonde curls catching the morning light. "I wasn't very good at flying," he said matter-of-factly, as if discussing yesterday's breakfast. "But Jazz always helped me. He said I was brave even when I was scared." Evelyn's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "Jazz? That's what everyone called Jasper before," Felix explained, selecting a brown crayon. "I was Finn then. We were best friends in the whole world." The kitchen fell silent, except for the gentle scratch of crayons on paper. Evelyn stared at her two boys, Jasper with his serious demeanor and protective instincts that seemed far too mature, and Felix with his trusting nature and the way he always looked to his older brother for guidance. They'd been inseparable since Felix could walk, but this was something else entirely. "Boys," she said carefully, "what do you mean before you came to me? You've always been my sons." Jasper set down his crayon and looked at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Mama, we died together in the war. Our plane crashed near a little island, and we couldn't get help. But I promised Felix, that we'd find each other again, that I'd always protect him." Felix nodded solemnly. "Jazz kept me warm when it was cold at night. He gave me his water when I was thirsty, even when he was thirsty too. He sang songs so I wouldn't be scared of the dark." The rational part of Evelyn's mind screamed that this was impossible, that children this young couldn't possibly know about military procedures or wartime experiences. But as she watched Jasper add realistic details to his aircraft drawing, details she was certain he'd never seen in any cartoon or children's book, a deeper, more primitive part of her began to wonder. "What kind of songs did Jas sing?" she asked softly. Felix's face brightened. "My mama's song, the one about the mockingbird?" He began to hum a melody that Evelyn recognized as an old lullaby, one she'd never sung to either of her children. Jasper joined in, his young voice carrying the tune with surprising accuracy. "Mama used to sing that to me when I was little, before the war. I taught it to Finn when we were waiting for rescue." The words hung in the air like morning mist, impossible to grasp, yet undeniably present. Evelyn found herself studying her son's faces, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate game of pretend. But their expressions held a gravity, a shared sadness that seemed to echo from somewhere far deeper than childhood imagination. As if sensing her disbelief, Jasper reached across the table and took Felix's hand, a gesture so protective and tender that it took Evelyn's breath away. "Don't worry, Mama," Jasper said quietly. "We're happy now. We found each other again, just like I promised." That evening, Silas Whitmore arrived home from his accounting firm to find his wife pacing the living room like a caged animal. Evelyn had always been the practical one in their marriage, the one who scheduled dentist appointments and balanced checkbooks while he got lost in spreadsheets and fantasy football. Seeing her this rattled was deeply unsettling. "Silas, we need to talk," she said before he'd even set down his briefcase. "About the boys, about what they've been saying." He loosened his tie and settled into his favorite armchair. "What about them? Did Jasper get in trouble at school again?" "No, it's—" Evelyn stopped pacing and faced him directly. "They're talking about past lives, military service, a war that happened decades before they were born. And they know details that are impossible for children their age to know." Silas chuckled, the sound tired but affectionate. "Honey, kids have wild imaginations. Remember when Felix insisted he was a dinosaur for 3 months? We couldn't get him to eat anything but leaves." "This is different." Evelyn's voice carried an edge that made him sit up straighter. "Come to dinner, listen to them yourself." 20 minutes later, the family sat around their oak dining table, the boys chattering happily over plates of spaghetti and meatballs. Silas was about to dismiss his wife's concerns when Jasper suddenly stopped mid-sentence, his fork suspended in the air. "Daddy," Jasper said thoughtfully, "did you know that if your plane goes down over water, you're supposed to inflate your life vest after you exit the aircraft, not before?" Silas blinked. What?" "Because if you inflate it inside the plane and it starts filling with water, the vest will trap you against the ceiling and you'll drown," Felix added casually, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "Jez taught me that when we were doing water survival training." "Water survival training?" Silas echoed weakly. "At the base, before we shipped out to the Pacific. The sergeant made us practice in the pool every day for 2 weeks. He said if we ever went down over water, the first thing we had to do was get as far away from the aircraft as possible because of the suction." Evelyn caught her husband's eye across the table. Silas felt his rational worldview beginning to crack like ice under pressure. "Boys, where exactly do you think you learned all this?" The brothers exchanged one of their meaningful looks, the kind that had always made their parents joke about telepathic communication. "When we were soldiers," Felix said simply, "before we died and came back to be your kids." "We were stationed on Guadalcanal first," Jasper continued, as if discussing a summer vacation. "That's where I met Finn. I mean, Felix. He was really young for a soldier, barely 18, and homesick all the time. He kept a picture of his dog in his wallet." Felix's face brightened. Rusty. He was a golden retriever. I missed him so much. Then his expression grew sad. I wonder if Rusty waited for me to come home. The innocence in his 4-year-old voice, combined with the profound sadness in his eyes, nearly broke Silas's heart. Whatever this was, imagination, false memory, or something far more impossible, the emotion behind it was achingly real. What happened next? Silas found himself asking, despite every logical instinct screaming at him to change the subject. We got transferred to a reconnaissance mission, Jasper said, his young voice taking on a formal cadence that seemed borrowed from another time. February 1943. Our job was to fly photographic surveys of Japanese positions in the Marshall Islands, but our plane developed engine trouble on the return flight.
The engine started smoking really bad, Felix added quietly. Jazz tried to keep us in the air, but we were losing altitude fast. He was such a good pilot, Daddy. He almost got us home. Jasper reached over and squeezed his brother's hand. I told Finn we had to ditch in the water near that little island. I promised him everything would be okay, that rescue planes would find us soon. The kitchen fell silent. Evelyn had stopped eating entirely, her face pale in the warm lamplight. Silas stared at his 2 young sons, searching desperately for some rational explanation for knowledge they simply couldn't possess. But rescue never came, did it? He asked softly. Both boys shook their heads solemnly. We waited for 6 days, Felix whispered. And then we went to sleep together, Jasper finished. But I kept my promise. I found him again. I found my little brother.
Sleep eluded the Whitmore household that night. Silas lay staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through every possible explanation for what he'd witnessed at dinner. Beside him, Evelyn tossed and turned, occasionally whispering prayers under her breath. Down the hall, they could hear the boys talking in hushed voices, a conversation that seemed to stretch well past their usual bedtime. At 2:47 a.m., Jasper's scream shattered the silence. Both parents bolted upright and rushed to the boys' room, where they found Jasper sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, while Felix rubbed his back with the practiced comfort of someone who'd done this many times before. "Shh, Jazz, it's okay," Felix was saying softly. "We're safe now. We're not on the island anymore." "But you were so cold, Finn," Jasper sobbed. "I couldn't keep you warm enough. I tried to give you my jacket, but you wouldn't take it." Evelyn knelt beside the bed and pulled Jasper into her arms. "Sweetheart, you're having a nightmare. You're safe at home with us." Jasper pulled back and looked at her with those eerily mature eyes. "Mama, it's not a nightmare when it really happened." Felix nodded gravely. Jazz has these dreams a lot. He feels bad because he thinks he didn't take good enough care of me. But he did. He was the best big brother ever. Silas crouched down to their eye level. "Boys, I need to ask you something important. What were your full names, your real names, from before?" The brothers exchanged another of their meaningful glances. Jasper wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Sergeant Jasper William Caldwell," he said clearly. "But everyone called me Jazz. I was 24 years old and from a little town in Ohio called Millerville. And I was Private First Class Felix Daniel Blackwood," Felix added proudly. "I was 20, from Portland, Oregon, but Jazz always called me Finn because he said Felix was too fancy for a soldier." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. These weren't just random war stories or fragments of movies they'd seen. These were specific identities, complete with ranks, ages, and hometowns. My mama, my first mama, her name was Dorothy Blackwood. She worked in a factory making airplane parts for the war. She wrote me letters every week, but I never got to write her back after we crashed." Jasper's expression grew fierce with protective love. "I promised Finn I'd make sure his mama knew what happened to him, that he was brave and good, and that he wasn't alone when it happened." "What about your family, Jazz?" Silas asked gently, using the nickname that seemed to fit so naturally. "Just my mama, Margaret Caldwell. My dad died in a mining accident when I was 16, so it was just me and her. She didn't want me to enlist, but I said it was my duty." Jasper's voice cracked slightly. "She made me promise to come home. I broke that promise." The raw guilt in his 5-year-old voice was devastating. Felix immediately wrapped his arms around his brother. "You didn't break it, Jazz. You just took longer to keep it, that's all. You came home to a different family, but you came home, and you brought me with you." Silas found himself blinking back tears. Whether this was elaborate fantasy or something beyond his understanding, the love between his sons was absolutely real, and it ran deeper than anything he'd ever witnessed. "Tell us about the island, Evelyn. What do you remember?" Felix closed his eyes as if accessing distant memories. "It was really small, maybe a mile long. There were lots of rocks on one side and a little beach on the other. We dragged some stuff from the plane before it sank, a first aid kit, some emergency rations, a tarp. The water around the island was the most beautiful blue I'd ever seen," Jasper added, "like looking up at the sky, but underneath us. During the day, we could see fish swimming around, and at night, sometimes dolphins would come close to shore." "It sounds almost peaceful," Silas said. "It was sometimes," Felix agreed. "Jazz would tell me stories about his hometown, about the girl he was going to marry when the war was over. Her name was Susan, and she had red hair and freckles." Jasper smiled through his tears. "I told Finn all about Susan's laugh, how it sounded like wind chimes on a summer day. And Finn told me about his plans to become a teacher after the war, how he wanted to work with little kids because they still believed in magic." "You got your wish," Evelyn whispered, touching Felix's cheek. "You work with little kids every day now, you and Jasper both."
Felix beamed at her. "That's true, and Jazz still takes care of people, just like he took care of me." As dawn began to filter through the bedroom curtains, the family sat together on the boy's bed, connected by something that transcended normal understanding. Silas knew that come morning, he would have a decision to make: dismiss this as childhood fantasy, or begin the terrifying process of investigating whether Sergeant Jasper Caldwell and Private Felix Blackwood had ever really existed. But looking at his sons' faces that somehow seemed to carry the weight of experiences far beyond their years, he already knew what he had to do. The truth, whatever it was waiting to be discovered. The next morning, Silas called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. While Evelyn took the boys to preschool, maintaining some semblance of normalcy, he sat in his home office with a cup of coffee growing cold beside his computer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he stared at the search bar, unsure how to begin investigating something that defied all logic. Finally, he typed, "Jasper Caldwell, World War II pilot." The first few results were genealogy websites and general military databases. Then, buried on the third page of results, he found it, a digitized roster from the 394th Fighter Squadron. His heart nearly stopped as he scrolled down the alphabetical list. Caldwell, Jasper William, Sergeant. DOB, March 15th, 1919. KIA, February 23rd, 1943. Status, missing in action.
Silas's hands trembled as he opened a new search tab. Felix Blackwood, World War II, 1943. This search yielded faster results. A memorial website dedicated to Oregon war casualties contained a brief entry. Blackwood, Felix Daniel, Private First Class, DOB, August 2nd, 1922. KIA, February 23rd, 1943. Died in Pacific Theater, body never recovered. Survived by mother, Dorothy Blackwood, of Portland, Oregon.
The coffee mug slipped from Silas's numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. February 23, 1943. The exact same date. The ages matched perfectly with what the boys had said. Jasper 24, Felix 20. Even the hometown details were precise. With shaking fingers, he continued searching, diving deeper into military archives that had been digitized over the decades. What he found made his blood run cold. A mission report filed 3 days after February 23, 1943. Reconnaissance Flight Tango 7 failed to return to base as scheduled. Aircraft P-38 Lightning. Crew Sergeant J. Caldwell. Pilot PFC F. Blackwood. Observer. Last radio contact received at 0947 hours, reporting engine trouble approximately 30 nautical miles southeast of Majuro Atoll. Search and rescue operations conducted for 72 hours. No survivors found, no wreckage recovered. Personnel presumed dead. Silas stared at the screen until his eyes burned. P-38 Lightning, the same type of aircraft Jasper had been drawing with impossible accuracy. Majuro Atoll. He quickly looked it up. A small chain of islands in the Marshall Islands, exactly where the boys had described their crash. But it was the next document that nearly broke him. A digitized letter from the National Archives dated March 1943. Dear Mrs. Blackwood, it is with deep regret that I must inform you that your son, Private First Class Felix Daniel Blackwood, has been reported missing in action in the Pacific Theater of Operations on February 23, 1943. Felix was serving as an aerial observer on a reconnaissance mission when his aircraft failed to return to base. Please know that Felix was highly regarded by his fellow servicemen and superiors alike. His commanding officer, Captain William Hayes, spoke particularly of the close friendship Felix had formed with his pilot, Sergeant Jasper Caldwell, who was also reported missing from the same mission. Captain Hayes described them as brothers in arms who looked out for each other with rare devotion. While we hold hope that they may yet be found, I must prepare you for the possibility that they made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Silas couldn't read any further. The letter blurred as tears filled his eyes. Brothers in arms who looked out for each other with rare devotion. The phrase echoed in his mind as he thought of Jasper's fierce protectiveness over Felix, the way they seemed to communicate without words, how Jasper had promised to find his little brother again. A sound at the front door told him Evelyn had returned with the boys. He quickly saved all the documents to his desktop and composed himself as best he could. But when his family walked into the kitchen, Evelyn took one look at his face and knew. You found them, she whispered. Silas nodded, unable to speak. Jasper and Felix looked up at their parents with those knowing eyes that no longer seemed quite so impossible. You looked us up, didn't you, Daddy? Jasper asked gently. Did you find our pictures? Pictures? Silas croaked. Felix nodded eagerly. Jazz had his picture taken before we shipped out. I was too shy, but Jazz made me stand with him. He said someday people would want to remember us. With trembling fingers,
Silas opened his laptop and navigated to a military photography archive he'd found. There, in a collection labeled 394th Fighter Squadron Personnel, 1942 to 1943, he found what he was looking for. Two young men in military uniforms stood side by side, arms slung casually around each other's shoulders. The taller one had serious green eyes and dark hair, eyes that Silas recognized with a shock of recognition. The shorter one looked impossibly young, with blonde hair and a trusting expression that was heartbreakingly familiar. The caption read, SGT Jasper Jazz Caldwell, left, and PFC Felix Finn Blackwood, right. February 1943. Evelyn gasped when she saw the screen. The resemblance wasn't just striking. It was unmistakable. Not exact, but the essence was there, as if the same souls were looking out through different faces. That's us, Felix said simply, climbing onto Silas's lap to get a better look. See? I told you Jazz always took care of me. In the photograph, Jasper's arm was protectively around Felix's shoulders, just as 5-year-old Jasper unconsciously did with his brother every single day. We kept our promise, Daddy, Jasper said quietly. We found each other again. Silas closed the laptop and pulled both boys into his arms, no longer caring about logic or impossibility. Whatever this was, reincarnation, miracle, or mystery beyond human understanding, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. His sons had lived before. They had died together. And somehow, impossibly, love had brought them home. The weeks following Silas's discovery brought an unsettling change to the Whitmore household. Now that their parents believed them, Jasper and Felix began sharing memories they'd kept hidden, darker memories that explained the shadows that sometimes crossed their young faces. It started with the nightmares becoming more frequent and more specific. Jasper would wake up screaming about the taste of salt water and the sound of metal groaning as their plane sank beneath the waves. Felix would cry out for Jazz in the middle of the night, reliving moments of terror when he thought his protector had drowned. Tell us about the island, Evelyn said gently one evening as she sat between their beds during another sleepless night. What happened after you crashed? Jasper sat up, his small, pajama-clad form somehow carrying the weight of a grown man's memories. The plane hit the water really hard. I managed to inflate the life raft, but Finn hit his head on something when we went down. There was blood in his hair. Felix touched the back of his skull reflexively. Right here. It hurt for days, but Jazz took care of me. He tore up his undershirt to make a bandage. We had some emergency supplies, Jasper continued, his voice taking on that formal military cadence. Water purification tablets, some crackers, a first aid kit, but not enough for very long. How long were you there? Silas asked from the doorway where he'd been listening. 8 days, both boys said simultaneously. Felix's eyes grew distant. The first 3 days weren't too bad. We had shade under some palm trees, and Jazz caught fish with his hands sometimes. He was so good at everything. But then the water ran out. Jasper's face crumpled. I tried to make the rain last longer by setting up the tarp, but there wasn't enough. Finn got so thirsty and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't save him. You did save me, Jazz, Felix said firmly, crawling from his bed to sit beside his brother. You gave me your water rations. You made me drink first, always. But it wasn't enough. Jasper's voice broke with a 5-year-old's tears carrying a 24-year-old's guilt. You got so weak, Finn. You stopped talking on the 6th day. You just laid there looking at the sky, and I knew we weren't going home.
Evelyn felt her heart shatter as she watched her baby boy carry the weight of a trauma that had happened in another lifetime. She pulled both children onto her lap, though they were getting too big for it. "What happened on the last day?" she whispered. Felix answered, his voice barely audible. "Jazz held me all night because I was shaking. Even though it was warm, I couldn't stop shaking. He sang to me that lullaby about the mockingbird and some song his mama used to sing." "Beautiful dreamer," Jasper said softly. "My mama sang it when I was little and couldn't sleep. I thought if I could keep Finn calm, maybe rescue would come. Maybe we'd make it." "But the planes never came," Felix continued. Jazz kept looking at the sky, listening for engines. On the morning of the 8th day, he couldn't lift his head anymore, but he still tried to give me the last sip of water.
Silas knelt beside the bed, his voice thick with emotion. "What did you tell him, Jasper, at the end?" Jasper looked at his father with eyes that held too much knowledge. "I told him not to be scared, that we'd find each other again, no matter what, that I'd always be his big brother, always protect him. I promised we'd come back together as a family." "And I wasn't scared after that," Felix said with wonder, "because I knew Jazz never broke his promises. Even when my eyes got heavy and everything went quiet, I wasn't scared because I knew he'd find me." "We went to sleep holding hands," Jasper whispered, "and when we woke up," he looked around the familiar bedroom with its dinosaur wallpaper and toy cars scattered on the floor. "We were here. We were your babies, but we still remembered each other." Evelyn couldn't stop the tears streaming down her face. "Is that why you've always been so protective of Felix? Why you won't let him out of your sight?" Jasper nodded solemnly. "I couldn't save him before. I have to make sure nothing happens to him now." "But Jazz," Felix said, taking his brother's hands the same way they must have in those final moments on the island, "you did save me. You loved me so much that even dying couldn't break us apart. That's the strongest kind of saving there is." As the family held each other in the soft glow of the nightlight, Silas realized they were witnessing something beyond miraculous. These weren't just his children. They were souls who had loved each other so deeply that death itself had simply been a pause between chapters of their story. The nightmares were memories trying to heal. The unbreakable bond between the boys was love that had transcended time itself. And somehow, incredibly, that love had brought them home to parents who would believe, understand, and help them carry the weight of what they'd endured. "We're safe now," Evelyn whispered into their hair. "Both of you. You're safe, and you're together, and you're home." For the first time in weeks, both boys slept through the night without dreams of islands or sinking planes or thirst that couldn't be quenched. They slept the peaceful sleep of souls who had finally been heard. Dr. Rebecca Chen had seen many unusual cases in her 20 years as a child psychologist, but nothing had prepared her for the Whitmore family. When Evelyn first called, describing her son's detailed memories of a past life as World War II soldiers, Rebecca's initial instinct was to recommend a different kind of specialist, perhaps someone who dealt with fantasy disorders or attention-seeking behaviors. But sitting in her office with 5-year-old Jasper and 4-year-old Felix, watching them interact with the maturity that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond their years, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about child psychology. "Boys," she said gently, "your parents have told me some very interesting stories. I'd like to hear them from you if that's okay." Jasper looked at Felix, and that silent communication passed between them again. "Are you going to try to make us forget?" Jasper asked seriously. "Because we don't want to forget. Forgetting would mean leaving each other behind again. Rebecca felt a chill. No one wants you to forget anything important. I just want to understand. Okay, Felix said, settling more comfortably in his chair, but it might take a while. We remember a lot. What followed was the most extraordinary session of Rebecca's career. The boys took turns describing their military service with a level of detail that left her speechless. They knew technical specifications of aircraft, military protocols, the layout of bases they claimed to have served on, even the specific taste of K-rations and the sound different engines made. "Jasper," Rebecca said carefully, "can you tell me about the P-38 Lightning you flew?" Without hesitation, Jasper began describing the aircraft's twin-boom design, its climbing rate, the way the controls felt in his hands during steep turns. He drew detailed diagrams of the cockpit layout, labeling instruments with technical terms no 5-year-old should know. "The Allison engines had a very distinctive sound," he explained, his small hands miming flight controls, "different from the Pratt & Whitney radials on other planes. When the port engine started failing on our last mission, I knew immediately what was wrong. The RPM dropped, and there was this grinding noise that meant the supercharger was going." Rebecca looked up from her notes to find both parents staring at their son in amazement. Later, she would verify every technical detail he'd provided and find them all accurate. "Felix, what do you remember about being an observer?"
Felix's face lit up. "I had a camera, a K-20 aerial camera. It was really heavy, but I loved using it. My job was to take pictures of Japanese installations so our commanders could plan bombing runs. I was good at it, too. Jazz always said I had the steadiest hands in the squadron." "Tell me about your friendship," Rebecca said softly. The boys' faces transformed, years of separation and reunion playing across their young features. "Jazz was like the big brother I never had in my first life," Felix said. "My real family just had me and Mama. But Jazz, he had this way of making you feel safe, like nothing bad could happen as long as he was there." Jasper's eyes grew suspiciously bright. And he was special, smart and funny and brave, even when he was scared. The other guys in the squadron loved him because he could make anyone laugh, even after the worst missions. He reminded everyone why we were fighting, to protect the good things back home. Rebecca decided to try something unconventional. With the parents' permission, she guided the boys into a light relaxation exercise. Not quite hypnosis, but a state where deeper memories might surface. "Jasper, can you tell me about the day you first met Felix?" Jasper's voice took on a dreamy quality. "September 15th, 1942. He was standing by the supply tent looking lost, holding his duffel bag and trying not to cry. He looked so young, younger than the rest of us. The sergeant was yelling at him about his bunk assignment, and I could see Finn's hands shaking." "What did you do?" "I walked over and told the sergeant I'd show the new kid around. Finn looked up at me with these grateful eyes, the same eyes he has now, just in a different face. I knew right then that I was going to look out for him." Felix stirred in his chair. "I remember that day too. Jazz bought me a Coca-Cola from the PX and shared his chocolate bar. No one had been that nice to me since I left home. He asked me about my family, about why I enlisted." "Why did you enlist, Felix?" Rebecca asked. "My mama was working so hard at the factory and I wanted to send her money. But also..." Felix's young face grew thoughtful.
I felt like I was supposed to, like there was someone waiting for me to find them. And when you met Jasper, I knew it was him, the person I was supposed to find. He turned to look at his brother with pure love. We were meant to be together. Rebecca spent another hour with them, documenting coordinates of islands, names of commanding officers, details about military equipment and procedures. Everything they told her would later be verified through military archives, information that was historically accurate but completely inaccessible to children their age. As the session ended, Rebecca faced the parents with professional composure that barely masked her astonishment. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I've been practicing child psychology for 2 decades, and I can say with certainty that what your sons know is impossible for children to fabricate or imagine. The level of detail, the emotional consistency, the technical accuracy, it's beyond explanation through conventional means. Silas leaned forward. What are you saying, Doctor? Rebecca chose her words carefully. I'm saying that your sons are carrying memories that don't belong to their current lifetime, whether we call it reincarnation, past life recall, or something else entirely. They're accessing genuine experiences from 70 years ago. Evelyn gripped her husband's hand. Is this hurting them? On the contrary, Rebecca said, watching the boys play quietly in the corner, Jasper still unconsciously positioning himself between Felix and any perceived threat. I think these memories, difficult as they are, serve a purpose. They're allowing your sons to complete something that was left unfinished. Jasper's need to protect Felix, Felix's absolute trust in Jasper, their healing from trauma that transcended death itself. She paused, then added something she'd never said to any family before. Sometimes love is so strong that not even dying can break it. Your sons are living proof of that truth. As the family left her office, Rebecca sat alone for a long time, staring at pages of notes that challenged everything she'd been taught about consciousness, memory, and the nature of human connection. Some mysteries, she realized, weren't meant to be solved, only witnessed and honored.
3 months after Dr. Chen's evaluation, Jasper woke from a different kind of dream. This time, instead of nightmares, he felt an urgent sense of purpose. "Mama," he said at breakfast, gripping his orange juice glass, "I need to tell you something important about the island." Evelyn recognized that serious tone. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Before Jazz and Finn died, Jazz wrote a letter to his mama. He'd buried it in a metal tin by the big rocks on the north side of the island." Felix nodded eagerly. "Jazz was worried his mama would never know what happened. He wrote everything down about how we took care of each other." "I promised someone would find it someday," Jasper said, eyes filling with tears, "that our mamas would know we weren't alone." Silas looked skeptical. "Boys, even if that's true, it was 80 years ago. A letter wouldn't survive." "It was in a watertight ammunition box," Jasper said firmly. "Jazz wrapped it in oilcloth first. Military training, important documents had to be protected."
12 steps north from the big rock that looks like a sleeping turtle, Felix added with precise memory. "What island?" Evelyn asked, heart racing. "Emu Island, part of Bikini Atoll," both boys said together. Silas grabbed his laptop and searched frantically. Emu Island was real, part of the Marshall Islands chain. More incredibly, a marine archaeology team was currently exploring World War II sites in that exact region. "There's an expedition working there right now," he told Evelyn, "documenting war relics." It took 6 weeks to convince Dr. James Morrison, the expedition leader, to investigate their claims.
Morrison had studied Pacific War sites for 15 years and was deeply skeptical of what seemed like an elaborate hoax. But something about the family's sincerity combined with Jasper's precise directions convinced him to spend one afternoon searching. The call came on a Tuesday evening. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Dr. Morrison's voice shook with disbelief. "We found it." Evelyn nearly dropped the phone. "You found what?" "The ammunition box, exactly where your son said. There's a letter inside, wrapped in oilcloth, perfectly preserved. It's addressed to Margaret Caldwell in Millerville, Ohio." 20 minutes later, the family crowded around Silas's laptop, staring at a photograph of a water-stained but legible letter. "Dear Mama, if someone finds this, it means Finn and I didn't make it home. I want you to know I wasn't alone. I had the best friend a soldier could ask for. His name is Felix Blackwood, and he's got the biggest heart you ever saw. We took care of each other right to the end. Don't cry for us, Mama. We found something stronger than dying. Promise me you'll tell his mama in Portland that her boy was brave and good and loved. Maybe someday we'll all find each other again. Your loving son, Jazz." Jasper looked up with peaceful eyes. "I kept my promise, didn't I? Someone did find it." Felix wrapped his arms around his brother. "Both our mamas know now. They know we weren't alone." As tears streamed down their faces, Silas and Evelyn realized they were reading the final words of two soldiers who had died decades before their sons were born, while simultaneously holding those same souls in their arms. The impossible had become undeniable. Love truly was stronger than death. 20 minutes later, the family crowded around Silas's laptop, staring at a photograph of a water-stained but legible letter. "Dear Mama, if someone finds this, it means Finn and I didn't make it home. I want you to know I wasn't alone. I had the best friend a soldier could ask for. His name is Felix Blackwood, and he's got the biggest heart you ever saw. We took care of each other right to the end. Don't cry for us, Mama. We found something stronger than dying. Promise me you'll tell his mama in Portland that her boy was brave and good and loved. Maybe someday we'll all find each other again. Your loving son, Jazz." Jasper looked up with peaceful eyes. "I kept my promise, didn't I? Someone did find it." Felix wrapped his arms around his brother. "Both our mamas know now. They know we weren't alone." As tears streamed down their faces, Silas and Evelyn realized they were reading the final words of two soldiers who had died decades before their sons were born, while simultaneously holding those same souls in their arms. The impossible had become undeniable. Love truly was stronger than death.
Felix looked confused. "But we're here now. Why do our old bodies matter?" Colonel Martinez knelt to their eye level. "Because those young men deserved to come home to their families. They deserved recognition for their service and sacrifice. Even if their souls have moved on," she glanced meaningfully at the boys, "their memory needs to be honored." The ceremony took place on a gray November morning. The Whitmore family stood among a small gathering of military personnel and historians as two flag-draped coffins were honored with full military rites. A 7-gun salute echoed across Arlington's hollowed ground, and taps played in the crisp autumn air. Jasper held Felix's hand as they watched soldiers fold the American flags with precise, reverent motions. When the ceremony concluded, Colonel Martinez approached them with the folded flags.
"These belong to you," she said simply, placing one flag in each small boy's hands. "Thank you for bringing us home," Jasper whispered, his 5-year-old voice carrying the weight of a soldier's gratitude. Felix clutched his flag tightly. "Do you think our first mamas know we're at peace now?" "I believe they do," Colonel Martinez replied, her own eyes moist. "I believe they've been waiting 80 years to know their sons came home safely."
That evening, local and national news outlets picked up the story. "Reincarnated WW2 soldiers finally receive proper burial," ran headlines across the country. The Whitmore family found themselves thrust into an unwanted spotlight, but they endured the attention because they knew it served a greater purpose. Dr. Morrison appeared on television, showing the letter and describing the impossible precision of the boys' memories. Military historians verified detail after detail, from technical aircraft specifications to the names of commanding officers. Skeptics struggled to explain how 2 young children could possess such accurate, obscure historical knowledge. But for Jasper and Felix, the media attention mattered less than the profound change they felt after the burial. The nightmares that had plagued them for months simply stopped. Jasper no longer woke up screaming about sinking planes. Felix no longer cried out for jazz in his sleep. "I feel lighter," Jasper told his parents one night as they tucked him into bed. "Like something heavy that I was carrying is gone now."
Felix nodded from his bed across the room. "We don't have to worry about being forgotten anymore. People remember Jazz and Finn now." Evelyn kissed both boys goodnight, marveling at the peace that had settled over their household. The trauma that had followed 2 souls across death itself was finally healing. As she turned off the light, she heard Felix whisper to his brother, "We did good, didn't we, Jazz? We kept our promises." "Yeah, Finn," came Jasper's sleepy reply. "We did real good. Now we can just be kids." For the first time since this extraordinary journey began, both boys slept through the night without the weight of unfinished business haunting their dreams. 6 months after the Arlington ceremony, the transformation in the Whitmore household was remarkable. The boys who had once carried the weight of a wartime trauma were finally free to be the children they were meant to be in this lifetime. Jasper, who had been obsessively protective of Felix since he could walk, gradually began allowing his brother the normal independence of a growing child. He no longer panicked when Felix was out of sight, no longer insisted on testing his food first, no longer woke up multiple times each night to check that his brother was still breathing. "It's like watching Jasper discover childhood for the first time," Evelyn told Dr. Chen during a follow-up appointment. "He started playing with other kids at school instead of just watching Felix. He laughs more. He's lighter somehow." Dr. Chen nodded, making notes. The hypervigilance he displayed was consistent with someone who had experienced the trauma of losing someone they were responsible for. Now that Jazz's story has been honored and his promise fulfilled, Jasper can release that burden. Silas, too, had changed. The quiet, sometimes melancholy child who had seemed to carry sadness too deep for his years was blossoming into a vibrant, curious 4-year-old. His trust in the world had been restored. Last week, Felix asked if he could have a sleepover at his friend Tommy's house, Silas shared with amazement. 6 months ago, he wouldn't even go to the bathroom alone. He's becoming fearless. The brothers still shared their special bond. That would never change. But it had evolved from desperate codependency into something healthier, the natural closeness of siblings who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Felix looked up from his spaghetti with a thoughtful expression. "Mama, Do you think Jazz and Finn are happy now that people remember them? Evelyn smiled. What do you think, sweetheart? I think they're proud, Jasper answered for both of them. They did their job as soldiers, and now everyone knows they were brave. But I think they're even happier that we get to be brothers again in a safe place. With parents who love us and believe us, Felix added, reaching for Evelyn's hand. That night, as the boys got ready for bed, they engaged in a ritual that had become precious to their parents. Instead of the frantic, trauma-driven need to stay close, they now chose to share their bedtime routine out of simple affection. "Tell me a story," Felix asked as he climbed into Jasper's bed, not out of fear, but because he enjoyed his brother's imagination. "Once upon a time," Jasper began, his voice carrying none of the old weight, "there were two brothers who went on the best adventure ever. They got to fly planes and see beautiful islands and meet lots of brave friends. And when that adventure was over, they got to come home to the most wonderful family and have a whole new adventure being kids." "Did they live happily ever after?" Felix asked sleepily. "They lived happily ever after," Jasper confirmed, tucking his brother in with the gentle care that would always be part of his nature, but now came from love, not trauma. Dr. Chen had explained to Silas and Evelyn that some cases of past life recall in children fade as the child's current life experiences accumulate. The boys' memories of Jazz and Finn were becoming more like distant dreams, treasured but not overwhelming. "We'll always remember them," Jasper had said, matter-of-factly, during their last therapy session, "but we don't need to be them anymore. We finished what they started." As Evelyn turned off the bedroom light, she marveled at the journey their family had taken. They had witnessed something impossible, experienced something miraculous, and emerged stronger for it. The nightmares were gone, the desperate clinging was gone, and the weight of unfinished business that had followed two souls across death itself had finally been lifted. In its place was something beautiful. Two brothers who had chosen each other across lifetimes, now free to discover who they were meant to be in this one.
5 years later, 10-year-old Jasper and 9-year-old Felix Whitmore stood in their backyard, building a treehouse with their father. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak leaves as they worked together, their laughter mixing with the sound of hammering and the distant hum of suburban life. "Pass me that board, Finn," Jasper said automatically, then caught himself with a grin. "I mean, Felix. Sorry, bro." Felix smiled back, unbothered. "It's okay. I still think of you as Jazz sometimes, too." Their parents exchanged a glance from the kitchen window. The boys rarely spoke of their past life anymore, but occasionally, like today, fragments would surface naturally, not with the intensity and trauma of before, but as gentle echoes of a bond that had transcended time. "Do you think about them much anymore?" Evelyn asked that evening as she tucked Felix into his own bed. He'd been sleeping in his own room for 3 years now. "Sometimes," Felix said thoughtfully, "especially when I see old war movies or when we visit their graves on Memorial Day. But it feels like remembering a really vivid dream, important, but not something I have to carry around all the time." Down the hall, Jasper was having a similar conversation with his father. "Dad, do you ever wonder why we remembered, why Jazz and Finn came back as us?"
Silas sat on the edge of his son's bed, still amazed by the depth of his child's questions. "What do you think?" "I think some promises are so strong they can't be broken, even by dying," Jasper said seriously. Jazz promised he'd always protect Finn, that they'd find each other again, and love like that, it finds a way. "Are you glad it happened, even with all the scary parts?" Jasper considered this carefully. "Yeah, I am. Because now I know that the people we love never really leave us. And Felix and I, we chose each other. Before we were even born this time,
we chose to be brothers again. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Colonel Martinez, now retired, stood on their doorstep with a manila envelope. "I have something for your family," she said, settling into the living room where the boys joined them curiously. "We've been contacted by the families of other servicemen who served with Sergeant Caldwell and Private Blackwood. There are letters, correspondence that survived in family attics and military archives. Letters that mention Jazz and Finn specifically."
She opened the envelope and pulled out photocopies of faded papers. "Listen to this one from a soldier named Robert Hayes to his wife. There are 2 guys in my squadron who give me hope that good still exists in this world, Jazz and Finn. They look out for each other like real brothers. Jazz is always making sure Finn eats enough, stays warm, and Finn has his way of making Jazz laugh even after the worst missions. They remind us all why we're fighting, for the love that makes life worth living." Felix's eyes grew wide. "Someone else remembered us?" "Many people remembered you," Colonel Martinez said gently. "Your friendship touched lives, inspired others. The love between Jazz and Finn became legendary in their squadron." She pulled out another letter. "And this one from a nurse who treated wounded soldiers. I will never forget 2 young airmen who were brought to our hospital after a training accident. The older one, Jazz, refused treatment until the medics assured him his friend Finn was going to be okay. Even injured, his first concern was protecting his partner. That kind of loyalty is rare and beautiful." As the letters were read, Jasper and Felix listened with growing amazement. They were hearing stories about themselves from another lifetime, stories that proved the bond they'd shared had been witnessed and treasured by others. The military wants to create a memorial garden at the base where they were stationed. It would honor not just their service, but the friendship that exemplified the brotherhood of military service. They'd like your permission to include excerpts from Jazz's letter in the dedication.
Both boys nodded solemnly. "Jazz and Finn would like that," Felix said. "They'd want people to remember that love is stronger than anything, even war, even dying." That evening, the family sat together on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The boys played with their neighborhood friends, their laughter echoing through the peaceful suburban street. "We did it, didn't we?" Evelyn said softly to her husband. "We helped them heal." "They helped us, too," Silas replied, watching Jasper boost Felix up to catch a firefly. "They taught us that love really is eternal, that the souls we're meant to be with will find us, no matter what." As darkness fell and the boys came inside, still chattering about their day, Evelyn felt a profound sense of completion. 2 young soldiers had made a promise in their final moments on a remote island 80 years ago. Against all odds, through love that transcended death itself, that promise had been kept. Jasper and Felix Whitmore were living proof that some bonds are so strong, so pure, that not even death can break them. They had found each other again, healed the wounds of the past, and were free to discover all the wonders their new lifetime had to offer. The brothers who remembered heaven had finally found their peace on earth. Before we end this, I want you to do something. If this story touched something deep inside you, write in the comments. Some souls never say goodbye. It might just be words to some, but for those who felt it, it means everything. This wasn't just a story we shared today. This was proof that love doesn't end when the body does, that some connections run so deep, not even death can break them. Maybe you've never been a soldier in a past life. Maybe you don't remember dying on a distant island, But who among us hasn't felt an unexplainable connection to someone? Who hasn't loved so deeply they'd promise to find that person again no matter what? In the end, maybe we don't lose the people we love. Maybe we just keep finding them in different ways, in different lives, until we get it right. The video ends here, but if something awakened inside you while listening to Jasper and Felix's story, don't let it fade. Carry that feeling with you. Some truths are meant to live beyond the screen. If this moved you, it's because you understand what real love looks like. You're not just watching, you're feeling alongside those who believe that some bonds are eternal. Here, we don't just tell stories, we honor the connections that make us human. Hit like if this story reminded you that love transcends everything. Subscribe if you want to feel more stories about connections that defy explanation. Because every video here isn't just content. It's a reminder that the most beautiful truths are the ones science can't prove, but the heart knows are real.